Okay, we've got Aditya Pandyaram from Augmate coming up, and he's a part of our team. And I could just tell you, last year we did a number of pilots with digital eyewear, and we learned a tremendous amount of things. So hopefully some of those insights will be conveyed to you today. Aditya.
Okay, awesome. So 2 notes. I'm going to use a cheat sheet, unlike Brent and Ketan, who've memorized it, which is awesome. So I have a little cheat sheet here I'll be looking at. Number 2 here is a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is very similar to what you've heard from Brent and from Ketan about the topics and the really quick win mentality that the ecosystem has to have to really introduce wearable technologies to enterprises. And that being said, one thing that you're probably noticing already is this is a true ecosystem play. This is not a instance in which one player is going to go in and change the world. And so that's where we sit as well. We're doing a lot of the underlying infrastructure for wearables, and we'll talk through some of those points today. Okay, so as Pete mentioned, last year, the year before, when we first started out, we were working on a lot of use cases that were in the spaces of picking, packing, inventory management. And today, we've moved towards use cases that are in the remote maintenance, telestration, workflow, sign-off, location-based alerts. And one of the prime motivators for this was actually the ROI. So when you're in these, what I call these smaller scale use cases like picking and packing, the ROI is realized at scale. And so the marginal ROI for each individual piece of hardware introduced to the environment is not that high. And so one of the questions that we constantly ask is, how can one pair of glasses or one watch or one other device really impact that worker? And how can we help that worker with a single device? And so what we found is on those bottom level of use cases that again, Ether, Accenture are looking at, these are the really powerful use cases where a single glass and a telestration application can allow a remote worker who's out in an oil field somewhere to call upon a remote expert to help him solve his problems. And so those are the kinds of use cases that we're looking at. So a few notes here and just some lessons learned from what we've done and some of the IT lessons that we've looked at. Wearable technologies, and when I say wearables, I'm implying AR, smart watches, smart glasses, all of the above. They're not in the category of BYOD just yet. And so a lot of times you'll find that an IT organization that you talk to immediately jumps towards the BYOD and immediately treats wearables as personal computers. And it's really important to note that where we are today in 2015, and at least for the next year or so, these really aren't personal computers. These are meant for short bursts of interactions. So watches specifically, right? They don't have the greatest battery life, neither do glasses. And so the short bursts of interactions are really powerful and can really help someone do their job better. And so we make that an active point to tell everyone that, look, wearables are tools. They have specific purposes. There are specific uses for them. These are not going to be on all the time, and you're not going to check your Facebook or your LinkedIn profile on your wearable devices, at least in the short term. Go back here one. All right, so the last point here that I want to talk about here is wearable environments and interactions. And so wearable environments and interactions are actually really key. So a lot of times we look at wearables and we say, well, maybe the wearable by itself, talking to the back-end system, is going to provide an incredible value. But there's a lot of other data and a lot of other interactions that occur within the worker's environment, within their workday, that are really important to recognize when implementing wearables. And so one of those examples here is the idea of automated interactions. So for example, if you walk into, let's say you're in a hospital and you have 2 different applications. One application is for a surgeon. That's an augmented reality application that allows him to do open heart surgery. The other application is for the same doctor doing checkups in the exam room. Well, those are 2 different applications. And one of the things that we recognized early on was when you give a end worker, a deskless worker, the opportunity to actually make a selection or interact with their devices, you're introducing a point of friction. right? And so wearable technologies are meant to really allow efficiencies within the workplace, to allow these workers to do their jobs more effectively. And so to reduce those, we realized that reducing the amount of interactions actually helps them use these devices and helps them adopt these devices quickly. So one of the examples that we talk about a lot is the idea of when you go into a particular room, that application or those sets of notifications should automatically appear. Kind of like Brent said earlier, if you're in the middle of a workflow, you shouldn't have a notification pop up and impede your work progress. It doesn't really make any sense. And so we've tied that, as an example here, to locations. And that's a really important concept, because what we don't want is we don't want people constantly interacting throughout their job, because that actually adds additional steps to their work process. Again, use case by use case basis. So another thing that's really important to talk about, and I think both Keithan and Brent talked about this, so I won't jump into it too much, but it's the idea of connectivity. So when Wi-Fi is not always going to be available to you. In fact, most of these wearable devices don't have Wi-Fi. A lot of these devices primarily run on Bluetooth or some other form of communication. So that's just something that's really important to keep in mind of. And one of the things that we talk a lot about is kind of this personal IoT mesh around your body, and how do those devices talk to one another to minimize the amount of failure between the Wi-Fi connection and the device while you're out in the field somewhere doing your work. Rapid deployment is key. So these wearable devices, the software on them, as you're probably seeing, the software and the firmware is updated at a pretty fast clip these days, almost on a weekly or bi-weekly for some devices. New builds are constantly being released. So it's really paramount to the success of wearables that there is an infrastructure out there that's going to allow you to rapidly deploy and rapidly manage all of these devices, as Brent mentioned earlier. Of course, the last piece here is, this is a big topic for those of you who are big in the IT space, is secure and anonymized data storage. So data coming off wearable devices is a very interesting topic, because a lot of that data directly impacts and directly annotates what a worker is doing throughout their day. So you have to be very careful about how you store that data and how that data is offloaded between devices. So, and I'm going to go into a shameless plug here, so bear with me. The last piece of what I'll talk about here is, and this is a diagram of what we've seen in the industry over the past year and a half. So the kind of bluish tinted ones in the top middle there, that's where we sat for the last year or so, in that we were developing custom applications on a use case by use case basis for some of these large enterprise Fortune 500, Fortune top 100 companies. And we would build these applications, we'd procure hardware for them from a variety of different places. We'd go out and we'd do a pilot. And the pilot would be somewhat successful, and they'd say, great, we love these pilots, let's go and implement these at scale. Because they're used to mobile devices. They're used to the idea of when a new application comes out, let's push it out to everyone using some platform. And we realized that there was this large chasm in the industry, whereas a lot of companies, as you probably heard today, had done a series of pilots, but you haven't heard too many talks about people who've scaled those pilots to 100 or 200 or 1,000 devices. And so we found this and we said, well, someone's got to build this piece out here. So a lot of what we've done is that piece in the middle. And so a lot of what we've looked at is really the underlying infrastructure, a lot of the back-end work that's required to fully scale these wearable implementations. So I'll conclude with our little booth number, booth 30, if you're interested in looking at how we help scale wearable implementations. And again, to be very clear, a lot of what we're looking at is a lot of the underlying IT processes, a lot of the security, the scalability, the reliability of systems. So all of that, I'll call it under the table work that hasn't been done yet for wearables. That's what we focused most of our time on. And that's all. So